The great ship Willflower hurtles uncontrollably through virgin space. Even if Eddie O'Hare had seen her at the start of the mission, he wouldn't recognise her now. Then, she'd represented humankind's proudest achievement, a sleek masterpiece. Now she's a twisted, warped mess. And the only man who can save her is made up of the bits even the most ravenous cannibal would leave on the side of his plate. Right now, he's travelling in the passenger seat of a corridor cart, trying to work out exactly what it is everyone's expecting him to do. He asks Oslo, "So where are we going?" Even though the cart is self-steering, Oslo has her hands on the drive stick and doesn't take her eyes off the corridor ahead. Planning room 7. Things have been happening very fast to Eddie, and he'd like a little time to gather his thoughts. "Could we stop off at my apartment first?" "What apartment?" "You don't have one. What would you need an apartment for?" "To live in, to rest, to refresh myself." "Come on, Morton, wake up. What are you going to do? Take a nice hot bath? Change your underwear?" It's true. He won't be doing any of those things, ever again. The nearest he'll get to freshening up is a quick rub-down for his metal suit at the automatic cart wash. "I still have to eat, don't I? The gloop contains all the nutrients you need, but they must get used up. Sure, the suit filters out unwanted chemical byproducts and sends them to a waste canister in your leg. Every so often, we have to empty the waste and pop in a fresh boost of nutrients. Every so often? A couple of times a year. Less, maybe. It's an incredibly efficient system." This is meant to sound like cheery news. Eddie will never eat or drink again. He looks down at his leg forlornly and tries not to imagine the waste canister lurking inside it, brimming over with putrid effluence. What about sleep? I need sleep, surely. You can sleep standing up. Your body doesn't need rest. What about privacy? Everyone needs a little of that. I want my own apartment, okay? Is that such a bizarre request? It's not like there's a major apartment shortage, is there? There's another reason Eddie would like a private room. He needs to interrogate the computer without anyone listening. Oslo inclines her head ever so slightly in a tight, grudging nod of acquiescence. "Fine. I'll get you a room." Planning room 7 turns out to be a stunningly well-equipped navigation centre. So stunningly well-equipped that Eddie doesn't have a clue how to use any of the equipment or even what any of it does. Fortunately, Oslo takes him over to a bank of hard copy files. All the surviving writings are here. And what exactly am I looking for? Predictably, the question exasperates Oslo. "I don't know. We have no idea what the hieroglyphic system is for. We need something that might just contribute to saving the ship from hideous destruction." "What do you think you're looking for? Video listings for the month of August?" But it would take months to wade through all this. He means to sweep his hand to indicate the ranks of files, but involuntarily kicks out his right leg instead and has to fight to remain upright. "You don't have to read it all. Just find something, some engineering layouts, contingency plans for engine failure, anything. The ship's charter, so we can get rid of that Gwent idiot and replace him with someone from the planet Sane. Anything you can find. Anything at all." There's another ship quake. A violent, sustained judder and a flickering of lights. Oslo waits for a second after the juddering finally subsides. "Just find it soon, okay?" Eddie waits until he's absolutely certain Oslo won't return with a final insulting afterthought before he tries to communicate with the computer. "Ship system? Log on Dr. Morton." Nothing. Okay. "Log on CP Gordon." Silence. He waddles over to a manual input console and tries logging in by striking the keys with the claw of his pincer. Painfully slow. The system's not responding. In desperation, Eddie adopts the time-honoured technique of kicking the machine and swearing at it. "Come on, you useless bastard! Speak to me!" Suddenly, the screen flickers, and a message appears on it briefly. So briefly, in fact, that Eddie can't be sure he read it correctly. What he thought it said was, "Calm down, Eddie. This is not the time." The more he thinks about it, the more Eddie's convinced he misread the message. In his mind it becomes, "Shut down ED1," or some such code, 3:30 a.m, ship time. Which is fine. It's a response and an acknowledgement of some temporary system error, boding well for future efforts sometime later. The truth is, he got it right first time. "How's it going, Doctor?" Even though Eddie's the only one Father Lewis could possibly be addressing, the room being otherwise deserted, it takes a few moments for the epithet Doctor to register. Eddie looks up from his pile of papers. "Not good, Padre. I haven't even scratched the surface." "That's why I thought you might like some assistance." Peck skulks in behind him, wearing an expression blacker than her robes. "Our science officer, trained to the job since birth." "I'm surprised," says Eddie. "She's willing to work with me." Lewis smiles at Peck. "She's aware we all need to pull together if we're going to get through this little hiccup in the mission, aren't you?" Peck nods slowly and grimly. Lewis is flicking through the papers Eddie has laid out on the desk. "So what are these?" "Flight data. I've managed to track it back to the point of the accident, but none of it makes sense. Certainly there was a vast shipwide trauma, but there's no evidence of any external phenomena that might have caused it. Not only that, why didn't the auto-repair systems kick in?" He turns to Peck. "You're the science officer. You must have considered some alternatives." "There is only one sane scientific explanation," offers Peck. "Clearly, it's the divine vengeance of the sweet and merciful Lord being rained down upon the wicked, the sinful, and the unrighteous." She delivers this opinion with such a sweet air, it takes Eddie quite by surprise. Well, when you put it with such relentless logic, the conclusion seems almost inevitable. "Well then," says Lewis, "I'll leave you two lovebirds to it, eh?" He stops at the door, calls back, "Play nice now," and leaves. Eddie looks at the papers, then at the cruel, thin, defiant lips. He's beginning to find almost irresistible. "Do you suppose," he pleads as pleasantly as he can, "that we might cooperate for the next hour or two?" It's not exactly a marriage made in heaven, and not merely because of Peck's unbridled loathing for him and his kind. There's nothing alike about them, nothing they can agree on, and she's surly, rude and intolerant to boot. Eddie's in serious danger of falling helplessly head over whatever he has now for heels. He's about to give up on examining the navigation records when he notices something wrong. "Peck, can you call up that 3D display of the local system?" She doesn't bother insulting him. She simply passes her hand over the desktop. The planets rise above the table into their places. "Can you speed it up, say 100-fold? Peck makes some movement with her hand and the display accelerates. Eddie peers at the madly twirling globes. He checks the printout. "The orbital paths of these planets, there's an anomaly. Look. Thrips, orbit. There's a sort of bump in it here." Eddie points his pincer as accurately as he can. "And the same with..." Gingerly, he points a pincer at the planet Penis, this one. "Right. So unless this data's been tampered with, there's a planetary body about 8 times the diameter of... Can you freeze the display?" Peck complies. Eddie concentrates hard and stretches out his pincer. "Here. Like this?" Peck's hands dance over what must be some sort of interface with the display, and a large wireframe planet appears between Eddie's stretched pincers. The dimensions look perfect. "Yeah, exactly like that." "How did he do that?" "The size of the thing," says Peck. "Its influence on the other planets. It has to be a gas giant." Eddie nods grimly. "And its orbit?" "Like this." Peck reanimates the display. The new wireframe globe joins in the complex planetary dance. "I should have spotted that." Peck's clutching the edge of the table so hard the blood has drained from her knuckles. "I shall have to chastise myself." "Chastise yourself? What do you mean exactly?" "I mean I shall have to take a flail to my back." Inside his head, Eddie is yelling, "Cut! Cut!" on his mental film set. This is not the time. He sends the film crew home, grumbling, and concentrates on the display. "Can you plot the ship's trajectory through here?" The display freezes, and a tiny luminous dot appears. "This is us now." Peck's hands move, and the display animates. "Us in 24 hours. The ship appears to be moving into the path of the wireframe giant." Not good. The massive pull of the gas giant is dragging Willflower off course towards it, and in 96 hours, nothing. The Willflower has gone. Lewis lounges back in his seat. The situation isn't good. Eddie thumps down a claw. I'm not sure you appreciate the full extent of this discovery, Padre. We're spiralling out of control towards an immense planet whose gravitational pull will compact this entire vessel to the size of a single constipated mouse dropping long before we even enter its atmosphere in less than 5 days' time. And that's not the worst of it. The worst of it is we have a saboteur on board, hell-bent on compounding the disaster. A saboteur? Surely not. Somebody obliterated that planet from the display. Somebody didn't want us to know it was there. Who? Someone on the committee, says Peck. Think about it, Father, says Eddie. It has to be one of the Pilgrim parents. Lewis gets up and walks around his desk towards Peck. Why didn't you notice the orbital anomalies in the planet? Peck looks down and starts fiddling with her rosary. All right, Father, I was remiss. That was inexcusably negligent. Lewis closes his eyes, as though he's sharing her pain, shouldering it even. That's all right, child. We can talk about it in the confessional. In the meantime, perhaps you might think about withdrawing to your room and whipping yourself for a while. This insane suggestion brings a smile of relief to Peck's features. Yes, I'll do that right away. Thank you, Father. Bless you. As the door closes behind the penitent, Lewis turns and grins at Eddie. That is one crazy chick. She's like a one-woman Spanish Inquisition. Lewis is starting to seem less and less priest-like to Eddie. Does she really do that? She really whips herself? Lewis crosses back to his desk. Oh, yes. Would you like to see a video? A video? Of Peck thrashing herself? Credible stuff. She's got a whole wardrobe of flagellation devices. And you have it on video? I have it by the trunk load. Lewis reclines in his leather chair, hands locked behind his head, wearing his beatific grin. You have a spy camera in her apartment? I have spy cameras everywhere. He leans forward and swings up the monitor from under his desk. On the screen, a woman Eddie vaguely recognises from the committee meeting is naked in a shower, locked in a lesbian embrace with a woman Eddie doesn't recognise. That's disgusting. You think so? I find it intensely erotic. No, I mean filming it. That's what's disgusting. It's immoral and disgusting. Eddie's point might be better made if he could tear his eyes from the screen. Lewis sighs and twists the monitor out of sight again. But I think it's important that someone knows what's going on around the ship, don't you? Anyway, no point in our being at loggerheads. We have more urgent concerns. Yes, such as avoiding large planets that appear out of nowhere. The truth is, says Lewis, that planet showing up hardly alters things at all. It simply gives us a more definite deadline. Unless we can work out some way of manoeuvring the ship, we're on a one-way trip to oblivion whatever happens. I suggest you get back to the record room and carry on digging through that paperwork. He treats Eddie to his most sincere paternal smile. Godspeed, Pilgrim. We're depending on you. And suddenly, Eddie knows. He knows it was Father Lewis who deleted the planet from the display. Back in the record room, 2 names on the personnel list interest Eddie. The first because he thinks he recognises it but can't remember where from, a Mr. Paulo San Pablos. The second is a strange name, Amalgam Willard Walters. Whoever he or she is, Willard Walters has the highest recorded IQ on board. In fact, it's the highest IQ Eddie's ever heard of. He's reaching for the phone when the comm screen flashes up Lewis's image. You were about to call me? Damn the man. Watching Eddie's every move, he doesn't even bother to make a polite stab at discretion. Paulo San Pablos asks Eddie, who he? There's the tiniest of tiny blips in the steadiness of Lewis's steady, sincere stare. Sorry, doesn't ring a bell. But it does. OK, let that pass for now. And this other one, Amalgam Willard Walters. You mean the professor's? Wait a minute, let's get this straight. Is Amalgam Willard Walters a single or a plural person? Technically, he's both. Eddie's travelling in the back of a corridor cart with Father Lewis. Disturbingly, 2 Styx drones are in the front, completely identical except for the letters on their foreheads, D and J.
The professors, explains Lewis, are a result of a badly botched scientific experiment.
What kind of experiment?
Willard and Walters headed the community research and development team 5-6 generations ago. Willard contracted a terminal illness, and the two of them agreed to graft Willard's brain onto Walters. 2 minds, 1 body.
But how are they still... I mean, 5 or 6 generations, that's a long time.
We have them in cold storage.
Cryogenics?
After the fashion, yes. Every once in a while, some bright spark insists on rousing them to see if there's any improvement, but there never is, and so we slide them back in the freezer till the next time.
The cold chamber, when they finally reach it, is empty at first glance. A dense mist almost a metre thick covers the floor. Lewis pulls his jacket tightly around him.
It's a little chilly in here. I hope your suit's well oiled.
Eddie follows Lewis and Jay Styx towards a far wall. Styx taps a code into a keypad, and a breach appears in the otherwise smooth wall. A long drawer slides out of the breach, slow-motion mist tumbling ominously from the top of it. As it clears, Eddie can make out a human shape, wrapped in some kind of thermal suit, and harnessed very firmly in place with a large number of excessively sturdy straps. Lewis pulls some kind of face mask out of a compartment beside the drawer and places it over the man's nose and mouth.
Finger on the trigger, Jebediah.
The drone hoists up his rifle and trains the red spot of the laser sight in the dead centre of the helpless man's forehead. Satisfied, Lewis tugs on the tube attached to the mask. Eddie hears the hiss of gas and the frozen man stirs. At the first sign of movement, Lewis hastily lifts off the mask and steps back to a more than safe distance.
Professors?
The man's eyes open wide, blink a few times, then he turns his head in Lewis's direction and squints.
Is that you, Raybold?
No. Raybold Lewis was my predecessor's predecessor.
Raybold Lewis was an utter bastard.
Yes, good old Gramps. This is Dr. Morton.
A very strange thing happens. The professor's face contorts into a new expression and another voice emerges from the mouth.
Hey, some of us are trying to sleep in here.
Always with you, it's a complaint. Can't you just
keep the noise down, that's all. I'm...
Pitch, pitch, moan, pitch, pitch.
Lewis tries to step in.
Professors, if I could just intrude on your squabbling time.
The professors raise their head against the restraints, affronted.
Squabbling? Who's squabbling?
The face contorts several times. There's clearly a monumental struggle going on for possession of the vocal system. Eddie jumps in. Listen, professors, this is important. The ship has sustained some kind of collision damage, and we're down to 1 engine. If his words are heard, they're not acknowledged. The creature simply carries on arguing amongst itself with rabid vigour.
This is my head! You're just a guest in here!
Believe me, I'd move out in a flash if I had the choice. Of all the heads I could have been grafted into, this has got to be the...
Eddie tries carrying on.
Listen, there's a planet close by, but we can't generate enough thrust to achieve orbit.
Suddenly, the professor's exertions cease. The head turns towards Eddie.
Wait a minute. Did you say collision damage? You're not in danger. It's something I predicted once. Engineerial evolution.
You predicted engineerial evolution? You couldn't predict a fart from a tin of beans.
Lewis reaches over to the keypad.
I think it's time for another nap, chaps.
The freezing mist starts to gurgle up from the base of the drawer.
No! Look what you did, you cheese dick! He's putting us back in the box!
What I did? You couldn't keep your filthy mouth shut long enough for us to draw a breath of real air, and now we're back in the frozen food compartment for another decade! Congratulations, genius!
As the drawer slides back into the wall, the verbal brawl carries on unabated. Eddie can even hear them after the compartment has retracted completely. Slowly, the altercation subsides as the cryogenic process works its soothing remedy. "There's genius in there," says Eddie. "If we could find some way of picking those brains, they might just help us out of this mess."
The only way we'll be picking those brains, Dr. Morton,
says the drone,
is off of the floor after they've been splattered thence by my shotgun.
They climb back into the corridor cart. Eddie feels badly about the whole interlude, about wasting their most precious and dwindling commodity, time. But he's wrong to feel that way. In truth, the professors have already helped. If Eddie had time to think it over, he might even work out how. But there is no time. For at that moment, the ship is rocked to its belly by an enormous tremor. There's a terrible, slow, creaking rumble, a low moan of distorting metal. The lights begin to flicker madly as the wall of the corridor warps and buckles along its entire length like a cracking bullwhip. Then a sudden violent crash lifts up the cart, and it hurtles through the air like a toy car flung in a tantrum from the hand of a child. Eddie is thrown from the cart, tumbling end over end, his badly controlled limbs flailing. In desperation, he tries clicking his claws open and closed at random, and finds something. He can't see what it is he's grabbed, but it arrests his motion and jerks him over to the side with a sudden sickening lurch. He thumps into some protesting metal and lodges there, upside down. He raises his arm towards his helmet and realises he's still clutching something in his claw. He holds it up. It's an arm. His pincer has severed it at the elbow, and its fingers are still twitching. Eddie's still screaming after the quake has stopped and the lights have kicked back in. He doesn't stop until the Padre's face appears in front of him, upside down.
You all right, Dr. Morton?
I've been better. You?
I'm fine. I used the drone as a shield.
Lewis reaches up and tugs on Eddie's torso.
Yeah, pretty firmly wedged in there.
He turns and calls,
Jebediah!
The drone appears, bruised and bloody, in the periphery of Eddie's vision.
Father, sir, regret inability to salute as I have temporarily misplaced my arm. Father, sir.
He holds up his stump by way of offering proof.
Tie that off, you clown. Here.
The priest takes out a handkerchief and uses it to fashion a rough tourniquet.
All right. Now try and find some kind of crowbar.
As Styx slumps off in search of tools, there's another distant tremor. Lewis's eyes dart towards the end of the corridor.
Look, Morton, would you mind if I left you here?
You want to leave me here, jammed upside down in a snack machine?
Well, one of us ought to get back to the control room, find out what kind of shape we're in.
You want to abandon me here, trapped with a wedge of family-sized chocolate bars crammed up my arse? But Lewis is already heading down the corridor, walking as briskly as he can without appearing to run. He calls over his shoulder,
Relax! Styx'll jemmy you out of there in no time.
Right on cue, Styx turns up, holding a metal rod in his remaining hand.
Sir, will this do?
That should be fine. Go for it. But the drone just stands there, swaying slightly, and he crumples to the ground. Eddie panics. What if the drone's dead? How long will he be stuck here? What if there's another quake? Without any kind of warning, the drone snaps awake and leaps to his feet.
Let's get you out of there!
Styx jams the pole behind Eddie's torso and leans his full body weight against it. Eddie feels something give and he crashes to the floor, head first. A large bubble floats lazily up through the liquid in his helmet past his face. Wait a minute. Why a bubble? He hasn't seen any bubbles before. Styx, is my visor leaking? This is vitally important. Am I leaking green gloop out of any part of my helmet or suit? There's no response. Styx! With a tremendous effort of coordination, Eddie claws his way cumbersomely up to his rectangular feet. The drone is lying on the floor, eyes open. Eddie can't make out colours too well, but he can see Styx's face has none. He kneels gingerly beside the drone, presses his visor against Styx's mouth and nose and waits there a moment, then pulls back. Yes, there's a tiny amount of misting. The drone is still breathing. As gently as he can, Eddie lifts him up, pincers open under his armpits, and slings him over his back and starts walking. Just around the bend from the crash, Eddie finds a corridor cart intact and ready to go. He lays Styx on the back seat and clambers into the driver's position. Now, how does it actually work? As he's tentatively reaching out for the control stick, the cart suddenly starts up of its own accord and zips off at a surprising speed, flinging Eddie back against the driver's seat. What's going on here? If the computer's operating the cart, how does it know where he wants to go? And why does it want to get there so fast? And if the computer's not in charge, then what the hell is? On the next bend, the cart seems to speed up, lurching up onto two wheels at an alarming angle. As it straightens out and the wheels hit the ground again, it actually accelerates. Eddie had no idea the damn thing was capable of anything more than a pootling amble. The cart hurtles wildly towards the next bend. Surely it has to slow down before it gets there. But no, it actually speeds up. The engine finds a new, higher pitch, screeching towards the oncoming wall like a mad, swooping banshee. As the wall rushes towards them, Eddie closes his eyes and tries not to imagine the mess his pickled brains will make splattered all over the corridor. A churning, grinding sound, a loud, discordant squeal, a kind of weightless moment, and he thumps down into the seat again. He opens his eyes. They made the turn, somehow. They are pelting along another corridor at spine-breaking speed. And again, they're hurtling straight at an oncoming wall, only this time there's a problem. This time there's no bend. Eddie looks down for some kind of brake, but all he sees is a jagged hole in the floor, through which his foot has involuntarily thrust the brake pedal. He looks up. Dead end. 2 words that sum up Eddie's future plans with beautiful concision. He gets ready to kiss his arse goodbye. He doesn't close his eyes in anticipation this time, so he actually sees the miracle happen. As the cart kamikazes towards the inevitable collision, the wall opens. It slides apart, enough for the cart to squeeze through, and whatever it is that's impelling the vehicle slams on the brakes and throws the drive into reverse, which is sufficient to stop the cart's forward motion in a screaming, thundering cloud of burnt-out engine and choking rubber smoke from the melting tyres. A handily placed metal bar arrests Eddie's forward propulsion by colliding with the top of his helmet. He clasps the metal bar in his pincer and hauls himself erect. He's in a transway carriage. Jebediah Styx is resting peacefully on the back seat, undisturbed and unruffled, the billowing smoke slowly subsiding around him. In his mouth is his one remaining thumb. The transway's motor winds up and the carriage lurches off. There's a loud electronic bleep in his helmet, and the face of Oslo blips into being in front of his eyes, staring at him, larger than life. Eddie is shocked by her sudden appearance. How the hell do you do that? Oslo looks puzzled. Do what? Appear like that in my face without warning. You're connected up to the ship comm. Didn't you know that? No, I didn't know that. Can you go now? I can't actually see with you in my visor. Where are you? She asks. I'm in the transway. I hope I'm heading for the medical bay. Why the medical bay? I've got a Styx here, badly injured, touch and go. Oslo's dismissive. Forget about him. Did you feel that last shipquake? Feel it? I was starring in it. Well, it ripped away the last remaining engine. Minutes later, Eddie's in the navigation room, craning over the display of the ship's status monitor, staring at the graphical reconstruction of the most recent disaster. This is supposed to be a Code Alpha emergency meeting, yet only Peck, Oslo, and Apton Styx have shown up. It's hard to believe the rest of the Pilgrim parents have found something more urgent to attend to. The alternatives aren't good. Either the communication system has broken down, or the rest of the committee are incapacitated, injured, or worse. Certainly the medical bay where Eddie dropped off Jebediah Styx was otherwise unoccupied. Eddie runs the graphic again. There is no ambiguity. So now we don't have any engines left at all. Mercy me, mocks Peck. How did we ever get by without your expert analysis? Oslo waves her hand over the monitor, blacking out the display. So, you didn't find anything? In the hieroglyphics? No, nothing yet. You've got to keep looking. Eddie turns to face her. He gets a strange, unfamiliar sense that for all their insults, put-downs and exasperations, Peck and Oslo are in some way looking to him for some kind of lead. Eddie? The leader? Invisible Eddie? How did this moment ever arrive? He does his best to rise to the occasion. I'm not saying we should give up. I'm not saying things are hopeless. Things are never hopeless. Suddenly, an image of the gas giant pops into his brain, looming towards the helpless, doomed ship. He tries to shake it off. Succeeds for the moment. So, we're not going to abandon ourselves to hopelessness. Nice speech, Eddie. He changes gear. Anybody seen Father Lewis? Oslo and Peck look at each other, then back at Eddie. Oslo says, Wasn't he with you? Well, I was wedged upside down in a snack machine. Styx was comatose, so he left. That sounds like the Padre, all right? Peck rounds on Oslo. What are you saying? Are you insulting the integrity of a man of God? Come on, Peck. He left the man helpless in the middle of a shipquake. He must have had a good devout reason. Yes, like saving his own sorry, devout ass. She turns to Eddie. Where did he say he was heading? He said he was coming down here to calm things down. Really? Oslo's long legs stride over to the comms panel. She waves her hands over the controls. And you were lodged in the snack dispenser. Here? A low-resolution image appears in the monitor above Oslo. A corridor. It looks similar to the corridor Eddie was in when the quake struck. Yes, but it can't be. I mean, it looks like the same corridor, but there's no damage. Well, not on the playback. Playback? What playback? I keep telling you, the suit is hooked into the ship-wide comm systems. Effectively, you're part of the ship. What are you saying? You can track me? You can trace everywhere I've been? Everything I've done? Of course. Now, Oslo starts waving her hands again. He would have taken some kind of transport. Eddie is aghast. Not only is Lewis spying on him, everyone on board can spy on him, any time they feel like it. Got him. Oslo looks up at the monitor. He took a cart to the transway and headed to his office. 7 minutes later, he was back on the transway and he got off here. Another low-res image, another part of the ship. A high, wide-angle shot of 2 huge bay doors with boxes stacked outside. Oslo pans the camera around and pauses on a box on the cart, which is wobbling. The image zooms in as the box rises, revealing a cassocked body behind it. Lewis staggers under the weight of the carton as he carries it over to the stack. Oslo shakes her head. I really should have guessed. He's loading up the S-tip. S-tip? The ship-to-planet module. What kind of passenger capacity does it have? Asks Eddie. How much cargo can it carry? What's its range? It can hold 10 people at a squeeze. There's lots of cargo space, but it's not sealed. There's no life support there. It's really only meant to cruise between the ship in orbit and the planet's surface. Lewis is looking up at the monitor, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. He must have heard the camera's servo tracking him. A flustered look crosses his face only momentarily. He puts the box he's carrying on top of the pile, crosses to the comm panel and flips the switch. Hello, can anybody hear me? Is this darn thing working yet? Oslo flips her own comm switch. Nice try, Padre. Going somewhere? Oslo, is that you? Praise God. I've been trying to reach you for ages. Right. And in the meantime, you thought you'd pack for a little trip. Lewis looks over at the boxes. This? Yes. That last quake destroyed the one remaining engine. So there doesn't seem to be any option left, does there? We'll have to pick a small group to try and make some kind of escape in the S-tip. I thought someone should start packing it up with supplies. And that group would, presumably, include you. Well, I hadn't thought, to be honest, but yes, I suppose I assumed we'd select key personnel from the committee. He's right, nods Peck. If we are forced to abandon ship, it would be vital for the survivors to have a priest among their number. Really? Oslo zooms in on the packing boxes. And presumably it would be equally vital for that priest to bring along his sacred pornography collection. Blurry, but readable, the box is labelled Videos, Shower Room Antics, 4. Oslo flips off her comm switch and turns to the others. Look, much as I hate to admit it, Lewis has a damn good point. With no engines, our only choice is to abandon ship. Wait a minute. Eddie's not sure what his chances would be of making the ship's top 10 list, but he has a good idea. How many of these S-tips are there? Peck answers. There's only one left that's operational. So, we have a single lifeboat that can hold 10 people out of a population of over 2,000. If you're worrying whether or not you'd be included, I'm not. He is. Well, you would be. Really? Eddie tries not to look smug. Not for yourself, for your suit. It's strong, it can survive extreme conditions, and you wouldn't be a drain on our consumables. Good Lord. They've discussed this in detail. Eddie turns to Peck. What about you, Joan of Arc? You on the saved list? Oslo cuts in. Of course she is. We need someone with a science background. Who else then? Sticks? Oslo nods. We don't know what we'll be facing out there. We'll probably need muscle, especially recyclable muscle. We can take his regeneration equipment. Churn out as many drones as our resources allow. So, us 4. Lewis, presumably because we're going to need someone to say grace at meal times. And who else? The captain? A guilty, conspiratorial look passes from Peck to Oslo. And suddenly Eddie understands their naughty little secret. You're not taking Gwent. You're keeping him out of the loop. Oslo sneers. What use would that silly little turd pot be? What special skills would he bring to the party? The ability to masturbate non-stop for 11 hours out of every 12? Wait. Peck is looking at a readout, which is flashing a red warning light. The S-tip's preparing for launch. Eddie glances up at the monitor. Lewis still appears to be stacking boxes on the pallet. That must be an error. He's not even inside it yet. But there's a shutter on the display, and Lewis jumps to a different position. Damn the man. He's hacked into the security camera and made it replay the same section of recording over and over. I don't like the implications of your filthy slurs against that honest servant of the Lord. Oh, stop it with your righteous indignation, woman. The man's moral sewage. You must have worked out he's the one who erased the gas giant from the system plan. Oslo narrows her eyes. Lewis is the saboteur? Why would he do such a thing? Isn't it obvious? He didn't want everyone to know how dire things really were. He's probably been preparing this little trip for days, weeks even. Are you listening to the insanity this stooge of Satan is spouting? There's obviously some kind of rational explanation. He must have some kind of saintly purpose we don't yet understand. Right. Eddie manages a painful nod at the warning light on Peck's console. In the meantime, St. Porno is warming up his engines. And by the time you decide that he's actually capable of deserting us, he'll be warming his toes in the natural hot springs of the planet Fripp. He's got a point. Oslo strides over to Peck. Override the S-tip launch sequence. Reluctantly, Peck turns and waves her hands over the controls. Faster. Peck's waving becomes more frenetic. Something's locked us out. Eddie looks up at the security monitor, with Lewis's smug, calm face looped over and over. At one point, he looks over at the camera and winks. He's mocking them. Eddie turns to Oslo. How long before it launches? She glances up at the readout. 7.5 minutes. There's an all-systems override, says Eddie. Or at least there used to be. Yes, in the captain's office. How far is that? 7 minutes. Too far. Call him. Call Gwent? Wake up and sniff your glute, Morton. What do you think Captain Dickwit will do when he finds out we've had a little escape plan of our own? And, oh, by the way, he wasn't invited. He'll have us put in jars, Dr. Morton. He'll strip out our spines and pickle us before he can sprout another pimple. We don't have time for this. Peck, will you call Captain Gwent? This is desperation indeed. Eddie is actually appealing to Torquemada's Lunia sister to bring some kind of sanity to the debate. Peck looks from him to Oslo and back again. Her features streamline into her famous trademark sneer. If it's the Lord's will that Father Lewis is to be saved and we are all to be cast into the infernal pit, then so be it. Amen. Only Eddie doesn't feel quite ready for the infernal pit just yet. He looks at the comms panel. The mechanism seems too delicate for his crude pincers to manipulate. He reaches out as gingerly as he can. His claw is poised above the switch. He concentrates hard. All it requires is a small movement, a little twitch, really, of the impulse that used to control his left thigh in the days when he still had a left thigh. Gently now. The pincer trembles. Good. And his elbow joint straightens with a sudden, astonishing force, sending his claw crashing down through the panel in a shower of sparks and slicing it in two. The speaker fizzles, exhales a final sigh of smoke and dies. He looks over at the countdown. The display is a series of red vertical bars, reducing in height to a flashing green baseline. Just a handful of bars left. As he watches, another blips off the screen and into oblivion. He keeps watching. He can't think of anything else to do. For a while, nothing happens. Then, nothing happens again. The penultimate bar should have blipped off by now. Surely. Oslo glances back at him, then up at the screen again. It's stopped. The security monitor jumps out of its loop. The camera is focused on Father Lewis in the pilot seat, presumably, of the S-tip. He looks extremely puzzled. He's checking his readouts and randomly flicking ignition switches, impotently. Father, Peck makes the sign of the cross. You're safe, praise be. We thought you were launching the S-tip.
On my own, goodness no. I was testing out the engines. They haven't been serviced in a goodly while, and somebody had to do it before we made the leap into the great unknown.
Peck is triumphant. We guessed it would be something along those lines, Father. At least some of us did. Lewis's alibi is, of course, planned in advance and impossible to disprove, but he still looks nonplussed. Flustered, even.
But I don't understand how... Well, you aborted the launch before I managed to do it myself, I mean.
The comm speakers suddenly start to vibrate, with an echoing snicker, and suddenly the gleaming braces of the captain's teeth are glaring down at them.
Who then, dudes and dudesses? How about, say, me, then?
The navigation room doors slide open, and a dozen heavily armed Styx drones yomp into the room, yelling blood-curdling imprecations, and then freeze. Weapons cocked and trained.
You're all under arrestovich.
What the hell are we waiting for? Oslo is pacing the small holding cell in a dementedly small elliptical orbit. Peck, sitting primly on the bench beside the sprawling Father Lewis, crosses herself at the minor blasphemy. Standard procedure, isn't it? Says Eddie.
Precisely, says the priest. Leave us to sweat it out for a while, contemplating the consequences. Morale gets low, before long we're at each other's throats. Frankly, it's an insult to our intelligence.
He smiles in that innocent, winning way he has, and Eddie wonders how long it will take the good priest to sell them all down the Swanee. I mean, what's his plan? Says Oslo, resuming her pacing. Eddie coughs and mumbles that Gwent may, in fact, be listening in. Probably is, in fact. Oslo throws her head back and shouts at the ceiling.
I hope you are listening, you poisonous little splat. Keeping us locked up here is killing all of us. You're killing yourself, which in actual fact is the only part of your plan that makes any sense. Yes! Ha! I applaud that!
She starts clapping, loudly. The cell door lock whirs open, and a pair of Styx drones, I and O, step into the room. One of them says,
The captain requests the pleasure of your company.
The pleasure of whose company?
Asks Lewis. The drone's eyes flit towards the Padre, then back.
Father, sir, I believe that will be all of your companies. We're to accompany you all down there.
Down there?
Lewis rakes his nails through his thick fringe.
Down where?
We're to accompany you all to the suspended personnel storage chamber.